Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet. My co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty well, Scott. As we mentioned in our previous episode, we are not going to have any news this week. So if there was a massive soccer story in Calgary over the past week, we're not going to be talking about it today. We have pre-recorded this episode in advance because we had anticipated we weren't going to be available to do a new recording.
We still had an interview that we're going to run with Foothills' new head coach of the Alberta Premier League team on the men's side, Darren Bowman, who brings a pretty impressive career and resume to the Calgary soccer scene.
Yeah, he's definitely seen a lot of things over the years in Man City and also in Asia, and now he's come to Calgary. So pretty interesting conversation overall about his journey and also just about the concept of player development in general.
Yeah, I guess let's run that interview now. I'd like to welcome Darren Bowman to the podcast. Darren is the newly named head coach for the Foothills men's Alberta Premier League team. Darren was previously involved with the Manchester City Academy for many years and has also coached in China and Hong Kong, which we are excited to talk to him about. Darren, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Pleasure to be here.
So I know I mentioned a couple of roles on your CV there, but can you go into a little bit more detail with regard to your time at Manchester City in particular, and maybe some of the other roles in coaching that you've held?
Yeah, I mean, my time at Man City, Scott, was basically my apprenticeship in coaching. And I was really fortunate to have some fantastic mentors, some very, very experienced coaches. And as City turned into the City Football Group and the exposure that we had to, the global network that really developed myself as an individual, which helped me develop as a coach, which helped me develop the players. And from the regime under Jim Cassell, many, many years ago in the 2005 era. And many people forget, Scott, at that time we still had players like Stephen Ireland, like Micah Richards, like Daniel Sturridge, John Guidetti, Vladimir Weiss, Albert Rusnek. Them guys were already in our academy at Platt Lane. The new Abu Dhabi consortium invested in the club and took over the club. The levels and the expectations went up, and rightly so. And at that time, I was head of the junior academy and the schools program. That gave me the opportunity to go full time with a young group of staff. A member of the staff at the time was an excellent coach now, Nick Cushing, who's currently the head coach for Denver Summit now in the women's game. And that's when we were recruiting players like Cole Palmer, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, CJ Riley, to name a few. And then there was a young Phil Foden at the time who was in the foundation phase of the academy. That role was really great exposure into talent ID and recruitment in a very competitive environment, with the likes of Man United, Liverpool, Everton, etc., all vying for the same players. James McAtee was also in there. And then under Scott Sellers, I got the opportunity to go into the full-time development phase and be a lead coach there. And then we launched the St. Bede's program, which was the first full-time football education program under the EPPP and the Premier League. And it really was a pioneering program, Scott, because that was a program that was leading and challenging other big academies at the time. And there was significant investment that went in from the club to develop basically Champions League players, which was what the directive was, from Chairman Caldoun and Ferran Soriano. That was the expectation. So we went from producing Premier League players, when I mentioned the players from before, to then being directed and challenged to produce Champions League players. And that full-time football education program was a real game changer for the club. And it's a program that they continue to see profit from today. And players that have come through that program and through that academy now that you see playing. And what gives me the pride, Scott, is players that we recruited and developed at the junior academy level through our schools program. likes of Tommy Doyle, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, CJ Riley, Cole Palmer, James McAtee, as you see them go through that system and into that St. Bede's program, that full-time football education program, which is truly holistic, for my education then, working with the likes of Scott Sellers, and then my real education was when Rodolfo Borrell came in to the academy and he joined from Liverpool, and Rodolfo went on to be Pep Guardiola's assistant for quite a few years, and was a first team assistant coach for Pep when they won the treble. And Rodolfo's career dating back to La Mesa at Barcelona, when his U14 team at Barca was the likes of Busquets, Iniesta, Xavi, Messi, so to be able to be taught by someone like Rodolfo for many years in the academy during that St. Bede's program, and then being exposed to the likes of Patrick Vieira when he retired with his career and then moved into that EDS role. It really was a fantastic apprenticeship. You couldn't have asked for better people to be exposed to and to learn from and to be challenged by. I mean, it was high performance. There was high expectations. It wasn't, we were expected to play a certain way. It wasn't just about winning games. We had to win a certain way. We had to play a certain way. And the performance took priority on many occasions over the result. So then that exposure to go into European competitions, as that investment came into the club, and then the exposure that we had globally, it was I'd say the junior academy was a baptism of fire, because that's the first full-time role in academy football. But then the development phase, leading that St. Bede's program, and then going into, the higher age groups, was really an apprenticeship that very few get to be exposed to.
You mentioned a lot of names there, and one name that stuck out to me was Nick Cushing, particularly because we know that a former Calgary-based coach, Leon Hapgood, got his opportunity in MLS through his former connection with Nick Cushing. And I was wondering, does he play in the group you're now in Calgary? Or can you tell us about...
So Nick, if you can imagine, back in the day, Scott, the Abu Dhabi consortium comes in, there's huge investment that goes into the club. Any club, the recruitment is key, is vital. And that grassroots and that foundation to recruit the best young talent locally. And Nick was one of them full-time coaches that I was leading. And it's a relationship that, we've continued and I value over the years. And I know Nick with Tim Dittmer came over to Foothills back in the day to deliver their pro camp under Tommy and Jay. So there's always been a connection and an affiliation to Foothills, and I've always kept up to date with developments in this part of the world. And through Nick and having a conversation with Nick and getting an introduction to Tommy, and that's the way football works, Scott, right? It's that when you're at a club like Man City and the City Football Group, you're able to build that global network, and the world can become quite small in football terms. I know of Leon. I've never met Leon, but I've always followed Nick's journey and that kind introduction from Nick, and always being aware of what Tommy was doing here in Calgary. So I always had one eye on this market, even when being on the other side of the world.
What made you feel like the timing was right? Like, I think you kind of already explained a little bit about your connections to Calgary, but what made you feel the timing was right to make the kind of move to come here to Canada?
Well, it was both, Jason, personal and professional. I mean, as you develop with your career and you mature and you've got responsibilities regards a family. My wife Laura is from Calgary. She's born and bred in Alberta, and I made her a promise many years ago when she forsaked her career, I suppose, at Bennett Jones in Calgary, to follow me around the world and move to England, to Manchester, and then move to Shanghai, and then move to Hong Kong. And, it was always in our plans to set up the family home and the roots back in Calgary. So from a personal perspective, the timing was right, because we spent over a decade away. And Asia can be quite far away from family based in Canada and the UK. And then for professional reasons, I enjoy projects, Jason, and it's a fantastic time for me to join Foothills as an organization. We've got huge potential, and also, doing the pro license right now and looking for that first opportunity in senior football, you know, and and opportunities in senior football, Jason, are not easy to get. That's the reality. And my whole career and my trajectory has been aimed towards that. So when the role came to play a part in the development of the academy, but also be at the performance end of it with the senior men's team and the rebranding of the APL, everything just lined up. And it's an exciting opportunity because of the relationship that we have with Cavs, a relationship that also is there with Wild. So we've got two of the big franchises as well that we're connected with. So that pathway for player development, but also the value that I want to bring is that, that succession planning and global pathway for our players at Foothills. So yes, we have two fantastic franchises, on our doorstep and in the building, and some great relationships there. But I really feel the potential of the players in Foothills, we can really widen the net. And having a network in Asia, having a network in Europe, and also being at the forefront of performance with the men's team, that was, when you put everything together, Jason, that was the reason that I felt the timing was right.
We've alluded to your time in Asia. I'd really like to get a little bit more detail about what it was like to coach in China and Hong Kong, and what were some of the maybe culture shocks you experienced from a sporting perspective as well as a lifestyle perspective, and how do you feel that aided you in your career and your development as a coach?
The opportunity in Shanghai in China came at the end of my ECAS course, which was the Elite Coaches Apprenticeship Scheme, which is funded by the Premier League. And that was really thought provoking. And it really challenged me a lot regards if I'm going to continue to develop in my career, you really need to get out of your comfort zone. And I had a very good mentor, or two very good mentors, in Heidi Hunter Cope, who was the psychology and the softer skills, and then Brian Ashton, who was the World Cup winning rugby coach for England, took England to another World Cup final, and then was the head coach of Ireland. And Brian is really a genius in many respects. And after that experience, Scott, and spending a decade at Manchester City, the opportunity to further develop and challenge myself came in China. And I really couldn't be prepared for the decision that I made, because the decision that I made meant that I was moving to the other side of the world, to a city with 27 million people. I didn't understand the language. I didn't read or write the language. And it dawned on me that coaching in a foreign language was really going to test all my softer skills, regards communication, especially. And all of these skills that we'd been exposed to on ECAS, I was really in a situation there where I had to really figure it out. And I was exposed to it on a daily basis. And China is a fantastic country in many respects, regards culture, regards potential, and the investment that they made and continue to make in sport, individual sports and team sports. And at the time, they were talking about, the potential to bring the World Cup to the country. If you've been to some of the tier one cities, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, you'll really be blown away by the facilities and the infrastructure. I mean, it really is a phenomenal experience. Yet my role was grassroots, schools, talent ID, and creating them frameworks for that development of their potential. I would say that probably the first 4 years, Scott, it was about survival, because every day you were challenged to be working things out. So what happened was I became consciously competent in many, many ways, because I had to think about everything I was going to say and do, and how that would affect the audiences that I was being exposed to. And that only enhanced my coaching capability, because I was coaching players and children. We couldn't communicate, so you have to find a way. And that really challenges your development. But then after 4 years, and then having a method and a way of working it out, that experience got me the role in Hong Kong. because the role in Hong Kong, they were very specific with what they wanted. My experience on the mainland meant that I checked out, and it really gave me the knowledge and the experience to go into the club in Hong Kong and be very clear on what was required. And when we went to Hong Kong, the boss, the president, Mr. Lee, a fantastic man, a very successful family, was very clear. And this is one of the things in Asia, Scott, is they're very clear on their KPIs and their expectations, and they're very clear on their timelines. So we had 3 years to develop the academy to become a championship academy, because in Hong Kong you have championship group and challenger group. We wanted to be in the championship group. We wanted to be Premier League champions, and we wanted to qualify for the AFC Champions League too. So that experience in China enabled me to go into Hong Kong with a very clear idea of the expectation and how we were going to go about it. And yeah, it was a fantastic experience.
You've had a lot of different roles, like, you talked about all different things you've done. How would you describe your role at Foothills? Is it more tactical? How involved are you in recruitment? Like how would you describe your role at Foothills right now?
My role at Foothills, I mean, the role is development phase manager for U13 to U17, tier 1 to 3, and then the senior men's team position. My role at Foothills right now, Jason, is one of learning. Every day is a day of learning for me. It's a huge organization with a huge membership, 92 teams. It's the biggest organization regarding youth that I've ever worked with and been exposed to. Yet I do have the experience in China when we were running the schools program in China, where one of my coaches would be exposed to 1,000 children per week. So I'm used to the volume. So now is about me learning about the infrastructure, the processes, and the procedures that we currently have, and then adding the value and improving on that, and really aligning key areas and with purpose and with the values of the club, what we need to achieve. So right now, Jason, I'm learning every day. I've got great support from the staff. I've had a fantastic welcome from the membership, and it's exciting times, but it's the pathway between how we go from our grassroots program into our foundation program, how our foundation program goes into our development phase program, and in the development phase program with tier 1 to 3, having an acknowledgement that talent develops at different rates. So you have early developers and late developers, and we have a huge pool of potential talent. And there's many stories, Jason, through Foothills where tier 2 and tier 3 players have arrived at the highest level. That's a real big focus for myself personally, because we don't want to be missing out on that talent, and we need to be giving everyone the same exposure and the best experience possible locally, nationally, and internationally with all the competitions that we're in. And then being aware of that and having our process, and then going into our APDL groups, and then competing for provincials and nationals, which is that competitive element, which is at the top end of the development phase, going into that performance piece, which is where, I really have a vested interest, because being the senior men's team coach, I want to know, about the 2009s, the 2010s, the 2011s. What is the level? Where are our potential players coming from? So that we're producing our best local talent. We're providing that pathway. And then we also have the exciting news of our Apex program, which is being launched in September 2026. And that is, like I alluded to, our St. Bede's program, Manchester City, is very much the start of that full-time football education program, which is going to be a game changer, Jason, for the development of our players. Again, we have to get the talent ID right. We have to do the work and get the processes right to fulfill the potential. And then it's about the pathways. So the pathways into the professional game, the pathways into NCAA, the pathways into national team setups for Canada, or with some of our players, boys and girls, young men and women who have that dual citizenship. We have players in the club who can play for Indonesia. They can play for Cambodia. They can also play for Canada. So in answer to your question, my role It's all encompassing, and I really, my real value is my experience to pay it forward, to challenge and support in equal measure for the staff, for the membership, for the players, and really bring out the potential that we have in the building. Because the exciting thing is, Jason, we have a huge amount of potential, and we just need to get this going in the right direction together, right? And that's going to be our challenge.
So, Darren, the Alberta Premier League season is, I think it's right around the corner, right? But very soon you'll be kicking off the season with this group. What do you think about this league? It's still pretty new in terms of trying to establish a foothold, but it's been quite clear in what its mandate is, as that filling a gap between the university season, the university level player and the professional player. So, what are you kind of anticipating as you begin the APL campaign pretty soon?
Yeah, I mean, the season is due to start, Scott, beginning of May. Okay, so we've been preparing for quite some time now regards, our recruitment, also assessing our 2009 players, for example, the potential that we already have. So a big focus has been on the recruitment and the dynamics of the squad, selecting the multidisciplinary team to go around the players when they arrive. The APL is that bridge, that I liken it to like the U23, the development in the big leagues in Europe. So La Liga, Bundesliga, EPL, we have them elite development squads. And everybody knows in the game that youth development, especially on the male side, that window of 17 to 23 is a key one when players can really develop and get the opportunity. So the way I see the APL is twofold for Foothills. It's that extension of development for the players that we will recruit and the players that we will promote. And is also an opportunity for us to bring, I would say, the professional values and the professional element to the pro-am part of our operation, and then really use it as a statement of intent, because it is performance, it is a competition, it is about winning, it is about preparing and performing to get that 3 points, and then to get to that can champ level. So it's a fantastic opportunity for us and myself personally to be involved and really inspire our youth in the building on both the boys and the girls side, because our young players need to see our APL teams as role models. They should be striving to, I want to be in that team. I want to wear that shirt. I want to compete at that level. And that's part of our pathway that we can control. And we know that if players stay with us, if they're not quite ready, they don't get that contract at 16, 18, or wherever it may be, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. If they can take the opportunity that we're offering, competing at the APL level, and I think, in Canada and Western Canada in general, is a vital competition that we need to continue to develop and continue to work so that we do close the gap to the professional game and we do give these players the extra time that they need and we give them the experience of what it's like, to be in a CPL franchise, that's the pro game. And obviously that's what you get paid to do.
You talked about with the composition of the APL, some of the clubs have really gone full on with their youth players and their academy players, the in-house players. And some teams have gone more in the direction of recruiting externally from other clubs. And what can we kind of expect? Like, what kind of mix should we expect on this Foothills roster for this upcoming year?
There'll be a balance of recruitment. We're looking to recruit Foothills alumni, the best local talent that's familiar with Foothills and has an affiliation with the club. It's very important that we bring that element of experience back because that's our DNA of the club. We also need to promote from within. There is space on the roster for our young players to take that opportunity. So yeah, in answer to your question, Jason, the roster will be a mixture of both. We need that experience to help develop our young players, our 2009s, right? They need to be exposed to that level of players so they have, in the training, they understand the difference between where they are right now and where they need to be. Because when you train and are exposed to this type of player who've been where they are, and have achieved, maybe they've achieved MVPs. They've been MVPs. So ball speed, standards, expectations, values, being exposed to that type of environment will be fantastic for our young players. And the aim, Jason, is to get the balance between that experience and that youth, yet that there's been a high focus on Foothills alumni. So a connection with the club, which is really important because a lot of players that I've spoke to and been connected with, they have had their development has been at Foothills in the past, and then they've gone away with university, etc. And but we want to bring them back because they know the club.
Regarding some of the names you mentioned as players who you kind of go through you saw go through the system, like Cole Palmer, Phil Foden, I think Jadon Sancho and Jeremy Frimpong and Brahim Diaz as well were mentioned in the Foothills news release we got when you were hired. But I wanted to ask if anything set those players apart when they were at a young age, or if they kind of maybe surprised you in terms of how far they've gone in their careers.
It hasn't surprised me where they are. It was clear to see the potential that all of them players had. One thing I think is important for the community in Calgary to know is for them players to arrive at the level and perform at the level that they are right now. There's always been there's an element of desperation and trauma during the development. There's they don't have a plan B. There's no plan B, there's no plan C. So if I don't make it, I can do this, right? None of them guys had that mindset. It's like a winner takes all mentality, Scott. They have to arrive. There's no other option here, and I think that's products of environment. And from a young age, they have responsibilities, and they're thinking about the future of their family. So it's a very personal experience when you're exposed to that, and it's huge responsibility as well. It doesn't surprise me now that these guys, are able to perform at the level they're performing at, Champions League, World Cup, European Championships. It's an absolute joy to see them. And they've all had different journeys, right? When they've gone into the pro game, yet all of them have an innate confidence in themselves, in their own ability. They enjoy the challenge. They enjoy the fear, if you like, Scott. They're special players and they're special people, the way they deal with expectation. But the biggest message I think I would say on that, which is what I've tried to get across in my career when I've been in Asia and now being in Calgary, is the top guys, they know and they enjoy the challenge and they accept the fear and they own it. And they do have a desperation to arrive and to win. And that's something that, as a coach, you have to identify and you work with. You can't give, right? They have it. So yeah, I think, to see Phil playing for Pep, to see Jeremy now arrive at Liverpool, to see, Jadon, the grit and determination that, he's still in the Premier League, and Cole, James McAtee at Forest, Tommy Doyle, who's at West Brom or Wolves now. There's a list of players, Scott, but the top guys, I think Brahim played for Real Madrid against City in midweek, right? So, but yeah, the top guys, they have that, and ultimately that's what makes the difference.
But Darren, thank you for your time today. We really appreciated the conversation and hearing about your career thus far, and we look forward to meeting you in person at some point this season. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this episode downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platforms. Check our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our archive and find other ways to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links to buy my book, Here Come the Cavalry, which is all about the history of professional soccer in Calgary. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media through X, Instagram, or Blue Sky, where our username is @YYCSoccer403. Thanks for listening.